Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. You are always at the mercy of your own deceptions. Vision, stone, and tile, aka Nathan Merrill said that. Our guest today said that on our last episode of the Culture Matters podcast that we recorded. We were talking about a handful of things around the old world, the new world. Before we get into these questions of the old world and the new world, and so the the consequences of social media in our culture and so on. What I have to say about Nathan is he's a deep person, he's a thoughtful person. He has a his own business as it relates to tile. Um, and I've learned a heck of a lot about how to be an artisan business owner from him. And I would say, I want to sell him on you because after learning about Tile in our first episode, he's probably something that you'd want to hire and pay a premium price for. So I'll be the one selling him on this show. But outside of that, a thoughtful person, someone I like to um, pick his brain. And this series is essentially threads talk. I don't know if that's what I end up calling it, but we both have threads profiles. Nathan's is Vision, Stone, and Tile. Mine is Jay Doran, the Culture Man. Please follow us on there. And let's start talking. We're going to talk today about some of the thoughts that we posted, among other things. Thanks for coming back.
As always, it's a lot of fun. I'm excited about it. It's the fourth time, which is wild. I'm so curious about how deep the backlog that you guys have is, because we're on to our fourth, and I don't think the first one posted yet, which is perfectly fine. This is not a complaint. This is a curiosity. I know that
Oh,
you're recording podcasts nonstop.
I'm laughing out of pain. What was it? Kierkegaard said, what if everything in life was a misunderstanding and laughter were really tears? I'm very anxious that I've let a lot of people down about it because, oh, by the way, I believe you when you say that you're not upset with me. There are people that are upset with me.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, well, in fairness to them, what kind of person am I to go and record all these hundreds of episodes so quickly without
Right.
lacking the resources or the resourcefulness to post them as quickly as I'm recording.
Yeah.
Essentially, this is kind of amazing part of our topic today because in one sense, I'm curious what you think about this. I'm siphoning people's earth time for my own profit in a sense.
Hmm.
Like, of course, by the 18th recording, have we not recorded any of these? You at that point, you have to be at some level upset with me. Because,
I, you might be surprised with me individually. As a particular person, you might be surprised to find that I don't think, I'm sure that that threshold exists for me, but I could do this indefinitely. I'm okay with that. Um,
but do you see
you're
where I'm going with that?
everyone,
Like, because it's like
yeah.
it's kind of in our conversation about this commoditization of our spirit or what we are when we
Hmm.
record these shows or we put out our thoughts in the world, we become the product. Like everything that we are is the product. So to answer your question, there's about 187 in the
Wow.
backlog. We're posting three a week. It's about to go to four, and then it'll go to five. And hopefully
Yeah.
by the time people listen to this episode, it'll be at seven.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't. I'm curious. Like, it wouldn't be. It's not odd for people to be upset if their livelihood or frame of reference of how they identify with their self-worth is how they're viewed by the crowd and consumed by the crowd. If they come on the show and then it never goes out or it doesn't go out as
Hmm.
quickly as they'd like, is as if they
Hmm.
wasted their time. Because it
Right.
wasn't just about us having a conversation.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, what's the fruit of it?
Right.
Curious what you think about that.
Well, I suppose everyone has slightly different motivations. My motive concerning our interaction is really curiosity pertaining to the nature of this type of dialogue between two people that are, I think that in a sense, me and you are infatuated is not quite the word because there's maybe a peevish or immature connotation with that word, but we both are just kind of obsessed with abstracted notions. We're obsessed with philosophical thought. We're obsessed with um, I don't even know if obsessed is the word. It's really our passion to converse in this way, and there's very few people that you can converse in this way with. So my motivations concerning this interaction are primarily connected to that. Monetarily, I mean, I appreciate the plug for the artisan tile work that I do, and that would be that's just downfall, just what's the word I'm looking for? An extracurricular win if something comes from that. But
Well,
it's
and
not my
just so the
motivation.
listeners understand, they really shouldn't reach out to you for that work unless they're ready to invest
Right.
tremendously more than the competition.
Right, right. In my local area, I am far and away the most expensive, and I do take the longest time. Now, that doesn't mean that I,
That should be on a billboard.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of my opening line with most clientele that I meet with is like, I'm not the cheapest. That's my opening line with basically everyone. And I'll say actually the opposite. I'm probably going to be the most expensive estimate that you get. Um, and that's fine. It does a whole lot for me. It acts as a great filter from the onset because I don't need lots and lots of jobs. I do 8 to 10 projects a year at the pace that I'm working right now. And for most guys doing tile like I do, they want to be doing, I don't even know, 36 or 50. If they have crews, I mean, they're doing maybe 75 projects a year. They're really cruising through stuff. So we're really just doing two different things. Um, what was the original question? I
Dude,
lost
it's
my
it's
train of
also because you're like the culture person of tile because we have such a
thought.
small group of human beings that we work at such depth with. So, yeah, like, that's cool for me to hear that that's how your business model has manifested itself as this is my observation then as a symptom or as a consequence of your personality or of
Mhm.
your which what is that an agglomeration of your temperament, uh lived experience, the books you've
Right.
read, the mentors you've had, the other careers you've had. At one point, you were a theologian, apparently,
Mhm.
and now you do
Right.
tile. So it's of course you're acting out the rabbinic model
Right.
of
Right.
of tile.
Yeah, and it comes very naturally to me because all of those factors that you mentioned just happen to be the course of my life. So there is none of the. I'm probably a bit of a counterintuitive voice relative to the nature of most of the voices on your podcast because there was no manipulative entrepreneurial path for me. The path was just an eclectic path that had all these various life experiences and influences. And so now I'm just like you said, I'm acting out to the best of my discernment and ability. I don't like the phrase who I am, but I'm just acting out this melting pot of ingredients in a way that it feels fitting for me personally. Now, this all could prove to be ultimately an experiment of delusion. I don't know. We shall see because my body can only go for so long. My finances, they can only you can only be an artisan as a pauper for so long before eventually it just doesn't work anymore. And I'm not saying I'm financially a pauper, but I'm not an entrepreneur in that sense that people use the word typically. Um, which comes with all of its own setbacks, its own
Mm.
pitfalls and things, but it also comes with a tremendous amount of freedom. And I think whatever the word means, authenticity. Um, I feel day to day very much at liberty to express creatively and to speak how I want, to speak with who I want, in a such a way that mm, I seek to follow my conscience. And perhaps that's something to do with my, as you mentioned, theological background. Um, I've just brought a lot of strange factors into what it is that I do.
And
And you're
how many
similar,
years have you been doing it on your,
17.
but on your own
Uh, like 13 or 14.
with this um 8 to 12 or 8 to 10 projects a year for 13
No,
years?
it has slowed down. The longer I do it, the more particular I get and the more artisan the projects become. So the less work I can, it's just me. I work with, so I used to have a tile store and I had employees and, uh, sold at a retail showroom in Cody, Wyoming,
Wow.
all while pastoring too. So I pastored simultaneously
Wow.
having this store. Um, but the more I've honed in on what it is precisely that I feel my value is in this trade, the slower I've gotten, the less efficient I've gotten, um, and the more artisan and bigger the projects have become. And relative to what is out there in the world, I am very much a small fry in the artisan tile world. There's people out there doing incredible things. Where my focus is, though, is on details. I mean, anyone can do incredible, big, extravagant projects. I like to hone in on minuscule details, the smallest of details. I can really appreciate.
Why is that why is that value for the customer, or is it not? It's value for you.
It's value for me and it's value for the customer to the extent that the things which I prioritize and resonate with in the world, they also prioritize and resonate with in the world. So it's really only valuable to a small subset of customers. And those are the customers that you see. This is going to sound funny, but you often see, like in the construction world with painters, there's a meme that floats around where there'll be a picture with 300 little pieces of blue tape on walls where the customers have come through and picked out every little thing that their painter may have missed. So they put a little sticky note or a piece of blue tape on the wall. Um, those are the customers that I enjoy working with. And that, so the value really is there for that customer that is not necessarily looking for perfection, but they're looking for someone who is willing to torture themselves through that process and get it as close as they can, relative to their budget and whatever loose time constraints there may be. Um, so it's valuable to those clients, and those clients do exist. Perhaps they're clients that are slightly neurotic in whatever ways that they are, which is fine. Neurotic people make their way through life with a bit of savviness and wisdom. They can make their way through life oftentimes very profitably if the path that they choose is a path of resonance with other people. Um, so I don't know that that is a great answer, but
Mm.
there are clients that resonate with the level of attention to detail that I have to be very honest. I picked that path because it just was what I wanted to do. And it seemed like there was a bit of a social experiment there to be had as well, which was, can I continuously focus on the minutest of details and also find clientele who can keep up with me in that regard? So that's just been the experiment that I'm allowing to play out. Thus far, people really like it.
Have you found that they refer other people to you?
Um, yes. So my work primarily comes through reference and social media. So those are my marketing avenues there.
What percentage would you say is each?
Um, it's difficult to say because I'm on a string of projects now, 2.5 years in with one particular builder, and
Wow.
there's been, I would say, probably about 20% projects sprinkled in throughout the year from designers or homeowners who happen to contact me if I have an opening in between projects with this one particular builder.
Wow. And they see you on social media with your videos that I watch.
Oh yeah, I turn down work almost continuously because of the social media.
Yeah, can you unpack that? How do you go about turning down work? I think that's very helpful for if I make this a little bit less, although I'm very curious about this, that'd be helpful for the audience because I find that, well, before I was able to say no, I said yes. And I
Right.
think the order matters.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, I think
order, the
so.
order has a consequence. And we have to at least be
Yeah,
able to say no, to
right.
at least have the capacity to say no. That ties into some of the other conversations we had about authenticity and
Right.
not being well, even this today we're talking about commodity being a commodity. But so yeah, my question is, what's that look like? How do you go about doing that?
Um, it will be relative to a person's own self-awareness because people say yes. If you're the type of person that habitually says yes, you're not. I think that psychologically, perhaps it's not necessarily rooted in in a an optimism that is your beacon or your north star. It's a surface optimism that really I think is rooted in fear, or perhaps it's rooted in a level of slavishness to the opinions and or feelings of other people. So you're afraid to say no. So or
Mm.
saying yes, perhaps I think that there's a shallow surface level optimism that would have a person believe that the brave path, the strong path is to say yes to every opportunity. But if your psychological temperament is one that perhaps your upbringing was treacherous, was rocky, was not necessarily as loving as it should have been, then your temperament's going to be rooted in a fundamental slavishness toward other people. You're a people pleaser, and it can have the obviously can have this reverse effect where you become uh, the martyr essentially. I think for many people on a deep level, they understand that's what they're doing, but they don't know how to get around that. The only way around it is just say no. You have to face the pain, the consequence of that, however the big the monster is in your mind of what that process looks like. You just have to face that process. Um, and I was not always the best at that. That's why I decided to scale down because through scaling down, it's actually given me a lot of firepower to say no. It's very easy to say no when it's just you, and it's
Mm.
very obvious. I'm overworked. I can't do it. I'm sorry. You know, on the flip side of that, as I tried to build up a business with employees and crews and all of that, then people take that entrepreneurial kind of aspect or drive as indication that, oh, this person wants more. And so more will come to you then. And if you're not ready and your temperament is inclined so that you're just going to continuously say yes, you'll bury yourself, unfortunately.
Mm. Um, Here's a quote I want to ask you about. I find that I often overlook the apparent and obvious meaning of life in preference of a mysterious,
Hmm.
individualistic personal meaning. The former allows my decision making to remain simplistic and obvious, and my obsession with I to subside in favor of the beauty and rhythm of the whole system. The latter shrouds my life with angst and confusion, often begrudging itself and leaving me in contradictory states with repetitious logical fallacies battering my psyche. You
Who
said,
said that?
yeah. Yeah. So let's,
uh,
this is on, vision, stone, and tile on
yeah.
threads for the listeners to follow. Where do we start?
Hmm. Let's start from the end and go backwards. Well, that's illogical. Let's start from the beginning. Um, I wish I had the quote written down to understand
Well,
it.
I read it.
The-
I find that I often overlook the apparent and obvious meaning of life,
right. Okay.
preference of a mysterious, individualistic personal meaning.
Yep. Yep. So that would be something that. So these are personal confessions, right? My threads is these are my thoughts. This is my outlook toward life. Um, I was a minister for 10 years, and so in the ministry, you have such a fixation, you have such a focus on transcendent notions, the things that are beyond. You're really a slave to meaning, if you will. And at a certain point, I just got completely worn out with trying to understand my own individualistic purpose or place within this entire system. It, it's it's a very first person, and this is where the contradictory states of being human all come come into play. But one of the consequence consequences of being an individual, for whatever reason things are the way that they are, we manifest as individuals with a first person perspective. That first person perspective, to my mind, sets as a default the way in which we interact with the world. We interact with the world through an individualistic framework. And I'm not talking about cultural conditioning, because different cultures, East and West, if you grow up in the East, say, take an extreme example, somewhere like Tibet, obviously you're not going to have that conditioned focus on the individual. Um, you grow up in somewhere like America, it's all about the individual and the American dream and that sort of thing. But if you just look at nature, the obvious and apparent patterns of reality, life is manifest, life is everywhere. And what, to me, all you have to do to understand what is life trying to do is just look what's happening. What happens, look through a microscope, and what you'll see is down to the individual cell. And there's that contradictory and counterintuitive notion because you have individual cells fighting for life. Um, I go outside and I look at something more macro and I see trees reaching into the sky. So in theology, my psyche was battered with this transcendent notion. It's this idea of man reaching up or God reaching down. Is it is it the incarnation of Christ or is it the Tower of Babel? Is it Christ being lifted up or is it Christ coming down? And I think that that's that real symbol of everything. That's positive negative dichotomy or whatever, the Zen thing, this idea of this and that. In theology and in religion, it was always that transcendent thing, which made me a terrible human being in the egotistical sense, obsession with what I want. Um, and I'm not saying I'm a saint in this regard, but laying that down, it just makes other things more apparent concerning life. Life to me is relatively simple. I mean, it's life seeks to propagate itself. Um, we emerge, we're biological systems that are alive, we replicate, we pass on our genetic expression to our offspring. And in the process is just a rinse and repeat process of of life manifesting, emerging, and perhaps there is a dichotomous nature to it because what is it manifesting against? What is it? What is it ultimately fighting? And maybe that's entropy. I don't know. We could talk about that a little bit. Um, but when I lay all those notions down, all of a sudden, it just is. Life just is. And my psyche then is free to not torment itself so much with all of my
Okay.
individualistic ideas.
So you're saying that when you overlook the apparent
Mhm.
meaning, that
Right.
opens you up to not be subdued by the consequences of the attachment of living in a dichotomy of the up or down, like God
Well,
coming down or man going up. I'm trying to. There's less. And if I could say it more simply, maybe, if I really understand it, was it that you were taking yourself, you believe that you were taking yourself too seriously, ironically undermining the very values that you idealized or
right.
projected, or um, to the point where that becomes a dogma, and you it's salesperson or broker more so
Well,
than the liver of the values. Like, ironically, for you to live the values, you have to cast away the conceptual framework. I don't think I'm saying this in a way that I don't think I'm saying this very clearly. Well, I'll say what
no,
I'm saying, because that first piece, when you said, I find that I often overlook the apparent and obvious meaning of life in preference of a mysterious, individualistic, personal meaning. That's what you
mhm,
were doing in the past
mhm.
when you
And
were
still
part of
do.
that institutionalism. Well, maybe now,
Yeah.
but in a way where, and still, what do you mean? Go ahead. No.
Well, I still, if I find myself in a place where, say, my physical health is deteriorating, maybe I have a few weeks in a row where I have, barring barring the obvious things, lack of sleep, your diet being messed up, all those sort of things. Um, if I'm in a funk, if you will, if I'm in a fog, if things are not going the way that at least I perceive they ought to be, very often it's because there's a certain constriction that's taking place of my spirit because I'm hyper focused. I'm overly attached to the things that I want. So yeah, you're right. It
So
was
when you subdue that,
right. When I let it
I'm
go,
sorry, when you overlook that, you're not attached to it.
when I overlook apparent and obvious things, which is life is. I'm part of this system that is life. I'm just a little piece of it. And I don't want to downplay the importance of it because I actually think that the universe as it is, life as it is irreducibly complex. I think that you can look at that two ways. One, the way that we would, let's take this top down or bottom up approach. If life is irreducibly complex as is, then what is the idea of religion? What is the idea of God reaching, or not even just religion, philosophy? What is the idea of ancient wisdom that exists throughout the world? If um, if life as it is not what it's supposed to be, then where do our notions of striving, where do our notions of animation, where do our notions of forward progress and movement, where do they come from? Life is apparently trying to do something, but it's a very complex system, and we're part of it. And from our perspective, I the cycles and the harmonies of life long term, we're talking about cycles that obviously or apparently are billions of years. These are huge cycles. And there are certain flows and harmonies to life that if I'm going to focus on me, my individualistic part in that, I can very easily just live in this frenzied state where I'm completely out of harmony with just life as it is. Life as we experience it for this short 70 or 80 years, is extremely harmonious. It's full of pattern just everywhere and structure everywhere. When I'm focused on me, I feel like I'm just a chunk of sand or just grit. I'm something in that system that's always at odds with that system, rather than recognizing, no, you're part of this system and you can flow with this system. You can move with the system. Life for you is as it ought to be in the most primary of senses, biologically. Your body, the thing that you inhabit in space, in reality, it is existing in harmony. And if I take it as truth that the system is irreducibly complex, then I will come to certain conclusions that no, things are not worth the strife in the way that I, as an individual, believe that they are. Because on a whole, uh, all that I can perceive is harmony. All that I can perceive is these patterns of flow and grace that it's like you are part of this system. So you can relax. Me, Nathan, as an individual, you can chill, you can relax. You're free to chase your dreams, all of them. You're free to not chase all of them. If you want to torture yourself, you're free to do that, but you're also free to not torture yourself. So does that clarify that any at
Has
all?
that been a useful um, conceptualization to yeah, to burden the angst that comes with having goals, having
um, it
you
has
know
been because I've
impulses to perform, to to actualize your mind in products and services.
in the sense that to the extent that those goals all still exist, they exist now within a context of harmony. They exist now within a context of human beings manifesting behavior that is what humans do in the beautiful sense. I don't, it's like this. We're either part of the system as a whole, or we're phenomena that has randomly emerged from the system here to fight the system. And both of those things are true. And I think a person has to hold space within them to understand that there's a certain amount of being like Job in the Bible. Remember, Job in the Bible goes through all these difficult things, and essentially he's shaking his fists at God, right? He is and he isn't. He says in the book of Job, he's maintaining his righteousness. He says in there one verse that if the Lord slays me, yet I will hold fast. And then at the same time, he's got a wife who's telling him, curse God and die. So he's hearing, he's observing from creation that everything is as it should be. And also you can take the path where you can believe that nothing is as it should be. So for me personally, it has helped because well, I don't know. This is I guess a matter of personal internal dialogue. I can't answer your question definitively. I don't know. Um,
That's a good answer.
there's a
Well,
baseline level of suffering for all of us, that we cannot be without. It's there for all of us.
we can't, maybe we can't be without, but we can anesthetize it.
Right? Or redefine it.
What do you mean redefine?
We can reorient ourselves to it so that we're not slaves to our ideas of what it is, what suffering is. Suffering is just suffering. Now, what it means to us is where we can reorient and we can redefine. You see what I'm saying?
Do you mean that looking at it an opportunity. There's a reason behind it. There's meaning
Or
behind
there's
it.
none, or there's none at all, and there is no reason for me to slavishly attach my sense of meaning to what is happening. We could just look at it and say, no, it is just the happening, and it's an irreducibly complex happening. And so, to each of us, a measure of this happening is that's what we're experiencing. So, there's multiple ways you could go about it. The one, the one redefinition of it to call it something that's the opposite of what it is, um, there can be a lived experience therein. That's perfectly fine. That's the eternal optimist. But on the flip side of that, there's the stoic, there's the pessimist who you could take it to two extremes if you want to attach meaning to it. But there's nothing that says you have to attach meaning to it. You don't have to attach anything to it. You can just be in it. You can just experience it. You can just be aware of it. And perhaps, yeah, I haven't figured this out. I think this is the real clash between the East and the West. And I don't know that there is an actual, well, I have nothing more to say on that topic really, because my mind kind of shuts off at that point,
Hmm.
trying to reconcile these ideas. Where I am in that equation currently is I am more on the side of disallowing my mind from continuously attaching meaning as an individual to everything. But you can be on the other side of that seesaw where you find great fulfillment and meaning in seeking meaning through everything.
That's a yeah, disallowing my mind to constantly attach meaning in everything.
Yeah.
Or one could fully jump in to that. And the question becomes to what end or to what? I'm looking for, if we're going to talk about labor,
Hmm.
labor without meaning is slavery, psychological slavery is it was something that comes to mind. Like if we're going to, for example, let's say create a work environment where people really feel a part of it's more than just the means, the resources for them to supplement their individualistic lives. Like that would be like what happens at home, right? Or their home, whatever that looks like, whatever that makeup is. They have family, the medium by which they get garner their resources is providing something more than just the resources. That medium would be, let's say, the corporation.
Hmm.
How does that corporation provide that meaning? And it does it through story, it does it through language, it does it through interaction, it does it through ritual, it does it through various things. When it doesn't do those things, the weight of the person's life can crush them. And I
Hmm.
think even we could look at this in a macro sense with a country,
Hmm. Right.
with right one's culture, and then in a meta sense, the human culture. This part of these conversations we were talking about, social platforms and what are the consequences of these social platforms. I have this idea I'm trying to work out where, um, there's one thing when our institutions have less significance or influence over our subconscious, let's say, or over our like below our awareness as individuals to start shaping our behaviors and shaping our viewpoints. And that's an institutional basis. Like, but the technology piece,
Hmm.
it's it's an all-encompassing, it's on another level. Like I don't know how
Right.
to articulate it yet, but it's
Yeah, it's
another
something
level
emerging.
of under. Well, go ahead.
Well, it's a context that we all live in that is emergent of something. And so I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging distributed cognition over the lateral spread of a corporation. I think that that is an entity with a distributed identity that has the capacity to be more than individual.
Yeah, if I'm
But
taking
now
this from
the
like a utilitarian view, it's if I'm even saying this correctly. Listen, if we want our consequence to be more, labor output, we're
Mhm,
going to have
mhm,
more. The more, whether they're fictional or not,
mhm,
the more it's like energy. The more energy is being focused towards that piece of
right.
the more energy that's if there's 1,000 people all looking at the same thing,
Mhm,
and we could have some kind of meter to measure the amount of energy that's looking at it, that's influencing that thing.
right.
There's more energy of 1,000 people looking at that thing, influencing that amount of energy looking at that thing, than if there's 999. There's
Right.
more energy. Business, the what's the the medium of business, what is it, products and services coming to market, it's mobilizing energy, people's energy
Right.
it's so it's in that it's just like what's the purpose of our marriage. It's well, there's multiple purposes. Biologically, it's to to
Mhm,
bear offspring. So like that's an impulse that's innate in the interaction. There's a consequence that's going to have to occur, an output like necessary for survival. The output of the business, like the products coming to market, the 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 profit necessary to sustain products coming to market.
mhm,
That's proportional to the energy flow of the business.
mhm,
People's so the amount of people that labor, whether it's physical labor, mental labor, whatever that hierarchy ends up being. Um, the more people are bought in, and let's in a simple, the harder they'll work.
mhm,
The more the community weighs on them, the more they'll be challenged to learn more, to be
right.
more useful, to labor more, to output more. There's just more energy, more. It's never
Right.
enough. It's the more. The unspoken truth of business, the world, more,
Right.
more, and and more until until it crashes, and then it's more.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
that's not
I look at
like all
consequences like what's the consequence, right?
right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if the consequence makes it real or not in a transcendent sense or not.
Well, in an apparent and obvious sense, we have harmonies. We have things that are harmonizing. Because look at biology on the planet. If you're to try and figure out, well, what is the objective of emergent biological life, and if you look at like I was listening to Michael Levin the other day. He's a biologist, brilliant individual, and there are many people on the planet that believe that the goal, the output of something like an evolutionary process that manifests biological life is just biomass. It is just more. It's just the replication of cells on the planet so that statistically and probabilistically, perhaps in a determined way, life has more at bats. Life has more opportunity for replication. It has more opportunity for um, genetic mutation and expression, just biomass. And you look at great historical events, at least that if you believe the narrative of how these historical events have happened, certain ice ages and this and that, all of these things happen. And afterwards, you'll see these explosions of biomass on the planet. You have something like algae, and then algae goes to something like plants, and then eventually what you have is organisms like us that we cannot glean enough energy to be what we are from photosynthesis. We have to eat other beings in order to sustain the level of
Actually,
energetic output.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how the system works. It's the Ouroboros idea. It's the system consuming itself. And so then you ask, to what end? And so this is why I'm
So
not
this is why
against.
I'm so bullish on the content, because
Yeah,
this is the new business, I think, in
right,
25
right.
years. I'm making
So
up
it
an
sounds.
arbitrary, like, business consumes us in a way that's external. There's the alienation of the that occurs as a result of the interaction between the dichotomy of the subject object is
Mhm.
integrated fully in this experience that we're having right now on the show.
It is,
This is business.
irregardless of what the motives are or the ideological beliefs of what's happening,
The
it
listeners
is
are feeding
happening.
on us,
Right,
and we're
right,
feeding on each other.
right.
If we were working in tile right now, we would be feeding, we would be, um, when we serve our customer, they're, so how do I say this? Okay, let's say we own the tile company tomorrow. The tile company, this figment of our imagination that is driving us to produce energy output,
Mhm.
focus energy output. It's feeding on us.
Right.
It's helping us feed on the culture,
We
and
are the
it's feeding
resource.
on us.
Right, right.
That's where the self awareness is, I think, in inversion to the success of the institution.
Right,
Self
right.
awareness
Yes.
and the growth of the institution have an inverse relationship.
That's
The more it grows, the self awareness of the founder goes.
mhm.
Let's say it goes down while the company's growth goes up.
Right.
That's my base. That's how theorem on the founder, the psychology of the founder, because the institution feeds on the worst of the founder. That is the generating impulse of the organization
Why
that attract. Why?
why why would you say it feeds? I'm completely with you on the nature of this interaction, and I think how we orient ourselves to this process then determines whether or not the psychological weight will crush or
Well,
enhance.
that's why
It's
we all have a
orientation.
consulting firm.
Right, right. It's how you orient to the process of consumption. Because this is consumer. This is
That's
what we're
why
talking
part of
about.
the
You're
value
consumer.
of having third parties that represent values. Consultants are the theologians of the business world.
Yeah.
Period. Like, that
I
is
like
what
that.
that is.
Yeah.
From a
Yeah.
phenomena. It's the
Right.
theologians of the business world. The role of the consultant is to tell the truth. However,
Yeah.
inherently in the relationship is to lie,
Hmm.
because through omission, if not inherently, because the power dynamic is, not to upset the apple cart.
Is it because you're putting a spotlight on one layer of this process? We're talking about an abstracted layer that's higher than
Well,
what
I'm
you know
laughing
what I'm
because
saying? Like,
it's fun. We're on a roll here. Go on? What are you saying?
well, I'm saying that you as a consultant are shedding a spotlight on this process that we're talking about, but you're really shedding a light on the orientation of the individual leader toward the process in such a way that the psychological weight of it is alleviated so that they can find meaning through this process of being
Well, they
consumed
have to, if they're
by.
going to work. This is the whole thing.
Mhm,
And this is
mhm,
where, hey, maybe monotheism dies with the end of labor as we know it.
mhm.
I mean, that's something I've thought. It could be just tied in with labor, how we labor,
Yeah,
how our species regenerates itself through
I
labor,
think it
through
is. Yeah,
innovation. So
yeah.
I don't, so where I'm going with that is, to for people, for for the system to not succumb to its own results, its own power, its own influences,
Hmm.
the transmission of values top down has to be strong,
Right.
and it weakens proportionate to the, we'll use a founding organization that's really reliant upon the originating consciousness that created it, which is the founder.
Hmm.
How the founder behaves sets the tone.
Hmm.
It creates the buy-in for those within the institution and those outside of the institution.
Hmm.
Within the institution are the employees at every level of the hierarchy. Outside of the institution, customers, vendors, potential employees, potential customers, so on. How they relate to the world, how they behave, how bought in they are, sends all these signals, node-like signals throughout their entire ecosystem that creates, that generates more power or takes away power, energy. Um, if the growth of the institution undermines self-awareness, there are anecdotes, there are panaceas. Well, is there a panacea? I don't think panacea, because it's a constant, it's not fixed. It's an
Hmm.
infinite, it's a treadmill that never ends for as long
Right.
as they're a part of the system. I believe that meaning is a proponent of labor, is where I'm going with this. That here's an example. The leader of a culture that achieves all of the vice, no, I'm sorry, all of the idealism, all of the ideas that they believe they needed to be a person. They've achieved
Hmm.
all their dreams. They'll lose their spark. They'll stop working. They'll they'll fall into vice. They'll fall into the world. They'll let all their followers down. They have to have another level of motivation.
Hmm.
They have to have another level of motivation to continue working, to continue laboring. Now, that can be
Right.
proportional to the internal conflict that presupposes the inspiration of, yeah, the inspiration of the idea, meaning the business, and the motivation in the first place. You know, the more suffering, I think, the more suffering of the individual, that's ends up in the business context, the more, the less likely they'll be deviated. But then that's also not external events, random events
Hmm.
can change that.
Right. Right.
Like, it would be it would be irrational not to say that, add that in. So where
Right.
I'm going with this is that meaning has a relationship with labor. Like, if our species didn't have to garner resources, we may have less of a propensity towards meaning. But then
Yeah.
again, if we didn't have to gather resources, we might have already killed ourselves.
Yeah.
We have so much time. We don't, like, why do we have to work together with our enemy if we don't have to garner resources to survive? Like, we enemies are called to the cooperative, are called to cooperation, right? Other
Yeah.
organisms that challenge our
Mhm.
our our assumptions, that are partially figments of imagination, as well as useful theorems to behave, to survive.
Mhm.
Other organisms, other groups that challenge those useful behaviors to survive slash figments of our imagination help us not succumb to the dis-ease, the disease of life, the dis-ease,
Mhm.
right? The anxieties that would internally feed on us till we destroyed ourselves. like
Hmm.
without, purpose, a self-created purpose. What the heck are we doing? What are we doing? What would we do
Yeah.
if we'd fall into consumptive behaviors where we're only consuming ourselves? We eventually die in every level. We have to create and consume constantly, like, and the order matters too. So but I think that
The
what we're
buy-in.
yeah, go. What do you think?
Well, I want to make sure that you've completed your train of thought there because I was following
There's
along
no
with everything.
completion to this. This is like
We're just
I'm
you we're
trying
yeah,
to,
yeah.
and then I got lost
Yeah.
somewhere because I'm
It's because we're
on a map that I'm trying to
well,
uh
yeah.
I'm
Well,
trying to
that's it.
place cities and space and things. Yeah.
We're looking at multiple levels of analysis here, and we're trying to tie in this at fate. If we're all boil it to really boil it down, we're talking about the manipulation of energy, like you said originally. And I think that's critical to what you're saying because let's go down to the smallest of levels. If we're trying to find validity, not validity, but we're trying to find a witness to what we're saying. If we're looking for a witness to what you're saying, then we have patterns on the largest of levels. On a macro level, we can look at what systems are doing, what are planets doing, what are galaxies doing, what is happening. And what you see is patterns of motion and movement. So you see energy being manipulated by a force. Now, that's a very transcendent idea, and we can't go too deep into what is manipulating what there, but at a really reductive level, it's the manipulation of energy. It goes way back to even the Big Bang, something like that. So then you have this large level abstracted notion or idea of what is matter doing, and matter is manipulating itself. What a strange thing. And you find the same exact thing on a molecular level or even a quantum level. You see this dynamic tension always, this retracting and stretching. It's like this. We've talked about this dynamic tension. It's the same dynamic tension that is within the individual. It's within the family. It's within the business entity, the corporation. And so, yes, the say the founder, he engages in this process of sacrifice. And he has to orient himself to that process in such a way that once his own personal goals have all been met, if he's only oriented himself to sacrifice in order to reach his own personal goals, then his entity has no regenerative or productive or reproductive value or longevity to it because the energy, like you said, it was this individual siphoning energy from a larger system to himself rather than as an individual contributing as as a smaller system to a larger level system. And so this what I was saying earlier, this notion of distributed cognition, the larger system will feed off of the individual pieces of the smaller system. And as a consequence, the smaller system, the parasitic individuals, because I mean, it's strange when you look at the cells of a body. They dwell in harmony with their neighbors, but they also exist as single cell organisms. A cell in a human body is a single cell organism, but it's within a larger system that they really have no notion of what's happening. It's just this larger system. All that they're aware of is their direct environment as far as their, I don't know what type of sensory ability, because most of this is taking place on a chemical level, what type of sensory ability that they have, but they're kind of reaching into their environment and they're feeling the tension, they're feeling the pushback, they're feeling all of that out to understand how best to exist within a larger system. And I think that's what you're talking to. We're just looking at multiple levels of analysis here that make the whole thing a, I don't want to say a bit muddled. It just takes a little bit of effort intellectually to understand all these levels of analysis, I think. I'm I think where what I'm trying to do is a little bit counterintuitive is I'm trying to orient myself to a larger pattern, if you will. Um, I don't know if, well, I don't want to say that. Am I understanding what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, I think the pursuit of happiness is a necessary illusion for productivity.
A necessary illusion for productivity. Now, what happens when you as an individual understand that that's what it is? And now you have the willful adoption of transcendent notions. It's no longer you as an individual thinking these transcendent notions are written into the laws of nature. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but perhaps those patterns are not discernible to you as an individual. Perhaps the only evidence of whether or not these things are so is in the health of you yourself, your family unit, or perhaps an organization or corporation that you're a part of. Perhaps that's the evidence. And as an individual, the quote you gave me earlier about the weight on my psyche, it came from wanting the proof before I understood the nature of the equation, or wanting the answer before I understood the mechanisms of how the equation works. And even all of that is language of it's dualistic language even still. It's language that is going to deceive the mind into thinking that everything has its logical progression. And if I could just figure out the logical progression of everything, then I can be the master of the universe. And that's where it's like I think we just have to identify processes that transcend us, but not so much that they destroy us. They transcend us in that we can see the next logical and harmonious steps we ought to take that are leading in a direction that we believe is appropriate, given our context and time and space and the bodies that we have and the capacities of our own intellect, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So that individual founder, I really like that I like the notion of him being consumed. There's a certain amount of buy-in that has to take place there too. In your experience,
Well,
would you
and
say
what are
that?
the consequences on our culture when everyone becomes a founder? So the
Oh, that's
definition
a
of
great question.
this is I gotta write it down. Yeah, what are the consequences? Because a founder, like the founder doesn't create anything. They do and they don't. They attract labor.
Hmm.
They represent values.
Is it
Uh,
through illusion though?
but the values, they represent behavioral patterns that are taken more seriously below awareness based on power,
Right,
and
right.
that alter human behavior. So the question, do people change? I actually don't think they do. I think they adapt to ideology of with what's within product proximity.
They
And so I
adapt
think
to
that
ideology.
within proximity, an ideology is represented by
Yeah,
those in positions of power.
yeah.
So meaning, we have what we are is really baked into us genetically and environmentally. And then we go into the world and we're attracted or pushed away from narratives of being represented ideologically by people that we are
So would you
attracted
say
to or
that
repelled from.
the longevity and long-term health then of an entity is proportional to how far out into that. So I mean, we're describing a game of peekaboo almost. We're describing this game of like, this is what I want you to see. Now, will you buy in? Knowing that you have a level of awareness above those who buy into the concept. Not that it's deception, it's just a level of awareness. Would you say that the longevity and health of an organization is proportional to the transparency of that notion. I mean, the founder, so it's like the logical steps of like the logical transcendent steps, right? What's the next thing? Um, that's not the right way to put it. I'm struggling to follow this chain of thought. Is you said power?
Yeah, well, then that's a broad
Hmm.
term. Um,
Yeah.
it's it's so it's hard to uh
What sh what
go ahead.
should the leader see? What should the founder see? How far out should his no level of analysis be in regards to the nature of this process of consumption? My what happens in my own personal mind is I go too far into these notions of abstraction so that
Well,
the
when
illusion.
that's contextually um lasered or focused
Mhm,
in strategy, in vision, in
mhm,
mission, in
mhm,
language and symbolism, and let's say systems of behavior, process of delivery, that ends up becoming the organizational chart and system that that all that abstracted, all that conceptual ability becomes the mini culture, the mini world that the founder creates or has the capacity to manifest, that attracts
yeah.
people that are looking for, they're looking for things they they're looking for things they believe they're looking for,
Mhm,
then they're looking for the things they're looking for.
yeah.
And and and
And
and
it's
and so that would be my retort to that. The the founder psychology is a state of unthinking. It's reacting. It's that's why, like, the definition of entrepreneur is just one willing to take on risk. It's like
hmm.
anyone can be an entrepreneur. They can start. They can start. Right. They could choose not to be a part of the culture because they're making a choice not to be a part of the culture when they start their own culture, because
Right.
they're a part of, if they're laboring for another's creation, they're a part of their culture.
So then on another level of analysis, that is a culture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So yes,
yeah. I mean, if a culture is systems of behavior,
yeah.
um, systems of behavior and interaction, right?
So if the
Instigated and propagated by ritual, language,
right, right,
symbolism, story, but it's like human action, human interaction,
yeah.
and the perceptions and the interactions. It's the combination of perception and interaction. The perception of the labor to the authorities at in power, and how they actually behave, that sows the seeds of trust, sows the seeds of buy-in to the fictional narratives necessary for energy to be output, for someone to choose to work 50 hours a week for the corporation and 10 hours less for the home.
So how does a founder tie this narrative not necessarily to something that's fictional, but understand the level of analysis plugged into larger formulas, if you will, of what is going on within reality? Because I think that you're right to an extent.
What do you mean? How
That
they
is
plug
what,
it in, like their own metaphysics?
not necessarily metaphysics, but it's a narrative, it's an ideology, it's a story that we're telling ourselves that this is how these entities work with their founders. But now let's take a different approach to that and understand, is there a way in which we can observe it for what it is, a pattern of behavior among individuals, among species, among groups of people, among entire biological systems. And then see the level of analysis becomes larger and larger until eventually we have harmonies that we're observing. We have movement that we're observing. And so
I
I,
want to
I
be clear
think
that
that
I'm trying to understand myself in the world through the medium that the world has chosen for me, and that I am
mhm,
too cowardly or not courageous enough to disjoint myself from. So going
mm,
deep, like your tile detail to me is business,
right. Well, these
and
notions
trying
are
to understand
connected.
myself in the world through this medium.
Yeah.
But we can take this in a broader sense and have a more human conversation. Is that where you wanted to, or like
Well,
what I was saying earlier about the in relation to what are the consequences of the culture where everyone becomes a founder? Because of
yeah.
the ability for us to have to share what we are, whatever we are, with the world, the way we're doing it,
Mhm,
that it will increase the amount of human beings that are in the path of founder, in the path of power, and power and values, I think, are at odds, or the transcendent values, that whether they are true in a transcendent sense or just
mhm,
true in a cooperative or necessary sense for survival. There's
yeah.
consequences in the obliviation the degeneration of the value of them. There's consequences of the
Right.
degeneration of love, the paradox
So
of
is it
love,
a
where we love people that love us and we hate people that hate us, which is a
right?
which is a contradiction of love, because love, it really only has a utility if we love people that hate us. But the contradiction that is, if we love people that hate us proportionally to the hate they give to us, then we die.
Mhm,
Like if you run that series out long enough, you die.
right.
If you love someone proportionally to their hatred of you, you die. You choose to let them kill you. That's love.
Mm.
That's what love does. It undermines existence in this plane of field. So uh what are the consequences of everyone becoming founder, or the ability to create their own reality would be the
Well, yeah,
obfuscation of love,
right.
because
So where
we don't have to we don't even know how to cooperate.
right,
We're only following ourselves. We're not even I think it leads to an infinite regress.
it does, right.
Uh,
And I think that's why my mind is going to such large level analysis
yeah, take it
because,
there. Fine.
well, think about what you're
Good.
saying. That what is the ultimate entropy of everything, though? We're coming. I had this thought this morning, and I thought, what if the most transcendent notion? What if the not even just transcendent? What if the realist notion of what God is entropy? And what it's doing is it's putting the entire system in a dynamic in it's putting the entire system in a tense state. And so now we have the opportunity for um, combat. Now we have the opportunity for contradiction. Now we have the opportunity for to and fro, light and dark, all of that. But it kind of redefines our notion of God at the broadest and largest scale. What you're saying is you're describing the mechanisms of love in their ultimate ends. Look at it in the person of Christ. You're absolutely right, because what happened to him? They killed him. So that's what you're saying played out there. Now, what individuals are doing on the planet is we're manipulating bits of energy. We are little gods. We're moving things, we're manipulating, we're creating, but it's all at the cost of consumption. It's all at the cost of energy being
Yeah, like
consumed.
Christ was the first personality brand.
The first personality brand. First personality brand. elaborate. Are you, there's a couple way, there's a beauty in the way you said that, because think about what I was saying earlier about the first person perspective. So he was the first as in chronologically, yes, but also there's a play on words there because he is an individual with a first person, you know, point of view there. So he, the equation played out there, the equation, the thesis that you laid out about the nature of this love and consumption, or love and destruction,
Yeah, like
life and
what
death.
if we can't it technology reveals, and it's going to
Right.
reveal the values, the average value. It's going to reveal the values in action and interaction, not the values in idealization or
Mm,
projection. It's going to reveal how we actually work, how we actually live. And so how we actually live is to be Christ-like in the sense of a personality brand. I have the ability to speak the word I am universally, because it could be
mm,
across the globe in a second, which means I am the truth, I am the word, I am.
mm,
And simultaneously, I am unable to burden the daggers, meaning the truth of others. I can block them, I can delete their comments, I can silo myself. Then I am, then we're all little mini, like you put it, I'm omnipresent
mhm,
and omniscient in the sense that we're not hearing any critical, we're not hearing anything against us, and we're omnipotent. We're in control of what we sense and feel. Like now
mm.
the environment is at our will because we control the feedback loop of our being,
Right.
of the relativism, the subjectivism that lives within through experience with our experience. Technology is giving us this capacity at the
Mhm,
base individual level. Now, what will be the consequences? Will the state take away our individualism because we cannot burden it?
mm.
Maybe. Will the state cancel our speech for us in its perception, right? Whether true or not, or partially true? Maybe. Like, what will be the swing back? If it doesn't, and our species hasn't integrated the values necessary below, well, I'm saying below awareness in the spirit of we're clearly not a self-aware species, because if we were a self-aware species, we would be a different species. Awareness is
Mm,
on a spiral.
mhm.
It's a spiral. It's not a finite, oh, I'm self-aware.
Right.
I don't believe that whatsoever. I think that is an irony of self-awareness, is that the view that it's, oh, I'm self-aware now.
Yeah, it
Um,
implies omniscience if you were.
no, yeah, it's the self-awareness is an unveiling. It's an un and it's contextual. Its context is shaped and molded by by the fruit of our labor, essentially, right? Our intellectual and
Mhm,
physical labor, technology being one of those fruits. So where I'm going with this is, what will be the consequences when I say Christ is the first personality brand? Um, as a steward of a new theology, it started, at the as a representation, the union representation of the individual, that right, like it's the individual, the 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 it, correct me if I'm off on my interpretation of what Christ represents. The individual, like the sovereignty of the individual, the like the perfection, the perfect integration of values in interaction. Uh, that's what I garner from his symbolism, is his role, representation is, uh, to be Christ-like is to is to be to exercise regression. I mean, exercise like exorcism, to exercise regression, the regression of the interaction of the conflict of the symptoms of conflict, to open feedback loops, to redeem, in redeem redemption in the sense of, to renew, to innovate, to reinvigorate individuals' progress towards themselves, the progress of themselves in relation to other selves, relating to the general sense of self given by the culture and redefined by the culture. Christ being that perfect representation of values in action.
Mhm.
Love your enemies. How do you love your enemies? Die for them. Like, it's opening a feedback loop when the world is
Mhm.
closing it up. Death is a closed feedback loop. Life is a reinvigoration of an open feedback loop. So if I'm looking
Mhm.
at Christ as a personification of the value of openness and progression in this paradigm,
Then you'll be killed, like you said
well, you
earlier.
and that's a pretty. I mean, that
Yep.
pretty much makes an argument for openness beating
Mhm.
closeness, because even if openness loses, it wins by getting to the next level. And
Right.
that
Right.
would be the
Right.
great reward. I mean, like, when I die, which, you know, our culture is the one that's giving death its significance. It's not like anyone's been on the other side. Well, so that's I guess the idea of Christ. He has been on the other side, and now he's coming to tell us,
Right.
by the way, this is what's going on. So
Right.
it covers all the bases there for where the human species has been up to this point, as
It's
needing to be
repetitious.
individuals. But when everyone has when everyone on the planet has a voice and can speak
Mhm.
their word, not the
Mhm.
word, their word,
Mhm.
what are the consequences of that?
Well,
Every value in the world will be revealed all at once.
mhm.
And there's a hierarchy of values based on what our goal, what the goal is. And everybody, it's like almost like, all right, this is how I put it. If there's, from preschool all the way up to postdoctoral work, everybody's in the same classroom all at once at the same time.
Mhm.
How's anybody going to learn anything? How's anybody going to learn anything? How's anybody going to get anything done? And all of a sudden, the postdoctoral students might want to start killing the children,
Mhm.
like just killing the babies. All the adults in the world are all in different levels of education,
Right.
degrees of power, abilities to conceptual, not just innately, like genetically, but environmentally, and a combination of both.
Mhm.
What are the consequences when everybody has the word, and not only their neighbor has to deal with them and love them? What are the
Right.
consequences of that? I don't know. I guess we
Well, I
could
think,
kind of we're gonna have to do a part two on this. Um, Final thoughts, though, Nathan. Bring us home.
well, I was going to say that's an interesting segue because it's the manipulation of energy and bits and all of that, as we started out talking about, has led us as a species to the point where now uh, we're we're on the cusp of emergent intelligence that perhaps will show us what we're alluding to. We're trying to understand the consequence of this on a level of analysis that is, we're really talking about things beyond mm, the notion of just a corporation or a business or one individual founder's life. We're talking about things that far transcend that, especially in terms of time scale. And so I would say that the consequence of what you're talking about in social media and everyone having a voice is well, we don't know because we've never been here before. And so now it's just funny to me that systems seem to be emerging with implication concerning that. I don't know. I think that long term, humanity is a blip in terms of our time on the planet as a species. There are fractally repetitious patterns happening. I think that the value of large scale transcendent notions is still there because it's like when you're looking at a candlestick chart for a stock for a company. You can look at it over the life of the whole thing, say 5 years. Those are going to be candlesticks that encompass large swaths of time. You could take one candlestick from 1 year and break it down into a weekly chart or a daily chart or even a minute by minute chart. And you're going to see the repetition of fractally similar patterns. And so all of it, like you said, is spiraling. And we'd like to say this way, but ultimately everything that goes up will come down. So what does it mean? That's a very good question. Um, I don't know what it means. I believe that it means that we are headed into a period of unprecedented transformation and growth, exponential growth, I believe, not for the human species necessarily, but for life and what life is trying to do. I don't know. Maybe these futurists like Elon Musk and these guys, maybe they're right. Maybe that the idea of the whole thing is to propagate life on a larger scale, a larger level. I don't know. I don't think any of these things are non-relevant to the founder in the corporation. I think that they're relevant things. If he has intellectual capacity to philosophize about these things, I think he can find small time scale patterns that will allow him to align himself with notions above himself that, like you said, people can buy into, they can sacrifice, they can consume themselves for the long-term benefit and health of the goods and services that their company is producing. A lot of I don't knows though in this dialogue here. I don't know. I want to apologize. My brain tends to go to really large levels of analysis, and you're doing a great job of keeping us anchored within timescales of human individuals and companies. But I don't think there's any real problem here. I think that the lessons of what we're looking at are, like I said, they're fractally repetitious. So there's things to be learned, no matter what the level of analysis is, really.
Mm.
I don't know if that brought us home or
Yeah,
not.
I
I
think
don't know
that's
where
helpful.
home,
Yeah.
where is home?
We'll see
We're
our
there.
Threadites on the next episode of the Thread Talk with Nathan.
Excellent.
Here we go. See you all next time.